I stared at the conference room screen while someone zoomed in on a $15 million wire transfer like it was a target painted on my back. My name sat right there in the access log, glowing like a confession. Gordon Rex, our CFO, folded his arms and asked me to explain my decision-making process. My mouth went dry. I didn't authorize anything. I wasn't even at my desk when that timestamp showed. "Then who was?" he asked, voice sharp as a blade. I tried to answer, but the room tilted when they pulled up security footage, showing my workstation lit up and active during the exact moment of the transfer. Gordon slid a paper across the table. It was a termination recommendation, with my name already typed in neat letters at the top. My stomach dropped through the floor. I'd worked here for 6 years, never missed a deadline, never cut corners. Now I was being framed for something I didn't do. The worst part? Everyone in that room believed I was guilty. I could see it in their eyes, the disappointment, the anger, the complete absence of doubt. My career was ending right there, and I couldn't even defend myself properly. By lunchtime, I was shoving my life into a cardboard box while coworkers pretended not to watch. My favorite coffee mug went in first, then my desk plant, the motivational calendar my sister gave me last Christmas. Everything felt heavy, like I was packing pieces of a life I'd never get back. HR recited some script about administrative leave pending investigation, but when I tried to badge out, the scanner blinked red and beeped loud enough for everyone to hear. Denied. I stood there frozen while security escorted me through the lobby like a criminal. Outside on the sidewalk, my phone buzzed. Bank alert. Account frozen due to suspicious activity. I sat down hard on a bench, struggling to breathe. My checking account, my savings, everything. Locked. How was I supposed to pay rent? Buy groceries? My hands shook as I tried calling the bank, but they just repeated the same lines about federal holds and pending investigations. People walked past me like I was invisible. An hour ago, I had a career, financial security, respect. Now I had nothing but a box of desk junk and a terror so deep I thought I might be sick right there on the street. That night, a business news blog posted an article. Senior accountant under investigation after $15 million vanishes. My photo was right there in the thumbnail, the one from our company website where I'm smiling like everything's fine. I threw up in the kitchen sink and then scrubbed it until my hands hurt, like I could somehow wash away the headline if I just tried hard enough. My phone stayed silent. No calls from friends, just a few weak texts saying, "Hang in there," before they all went quiet. Even my best friend from college stopped responding. Mom called at midnight, voice trembling. She asked if she needed to sell her car to help pay for lawyers. I told her no, and then cried into my pillow so she wouldn't hear me fall apart. The article had over 2,000 shares already. Comment sections filled with strangers calling me a thief, saying I should go to prison. Someone found my social media and started posting my address in forums. I deleted everything, but screenshots live forever. My entire life was unraveling in real time, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. The message was short. "Check the backups you took home." I dug through my closet until I found the dusty external hard drive buried in a shoebox under old sweaters. I'd been backing up month-end reports at home for years, just a habit, nothing suspicious. My hands shook as I plugged it in. The folders opened slowly, revealing spreadsheets I'd nearly forgotten about. There was one labeled Weird Stuff, where I'd been tracking discrepancies that never made sense. Vendor accounts that appeared out of nowhere. Invoices marked paid at strange hours. Always the same time, 2:03 in the morning. I opened the files and started cross-referencing. A pattern emerged like a map revealing buried treasure. Dozens of vendors, all created just under the approval threshold so they wouldn't trigger reviews. Payments flowing out in neat little streams, always at 2:03, always to companies I'd never heard of. My pulse steadied as I worked. This was evidence. This was proof that something wrong had been happening long before that 15 million disappeared. Then I saw it. One of the vendor contact emails ended with @rexconsulting.net. Rex, as in Gordon Rex, my boss, the man who just fired me and blamed everything on me. My breath caught in my throat. I remembered the day the money vanished. I'd gone home at noon with a migraine so brutal I could barely see straight. I'd submitted a time-off request through the system. It was documented, time-stamped, approved. But the transfer happened at 2:03 that afternoon, under my login credentials, while I was passed out in my dark bedroom with ice on my head. That didn't make sense unless someone else had access to my account. I pulled up the multi-factor authentication audit log from my backup, and my stomach lurched. There was a second device registered to my account, a device I'd never seen or approved. Someone had registered it 2 weeks before the big transfer. I took screenshots of everything, hands trembling. They'd cloned my credentials. Someone had copied my access, registered their own authentication device, and used my identity to steal $15 million. And now I was taking the fall for it while the real thief walked free. My phone buzzed. Alfred from IT. His message was short and urgent. Meet me now. Not your place. Not mine either. I grabbed my keys, stuffed the hard drive in my bag, and ran out the door. My heart hammered the entire drive across town. If Alfred had information, it meant he'd been watching. And if he'd been watching, he might know who really did this. We sat in Alfred's car, in an empty parking garage, windows fogging up from our breath. He wouldn't look at me directly, kept checking his mirrors like he expected someone to appear. Then he showed me a photo on his phone, a small security key being held under a desk lamp. Someone copied physical access tokens last month, he whispered. I flagged it in the security system. The ticket disappeared the next day. He rubbed his face, looking exhausted. I got called into HR. They told me to focus on my core duties and stop asking questions. Alfred handed me a thumb drive. Security exports, logs, footage, timestamps, authentication records, everything I could grab before they locked me out. His voice cracked. I think it's Gordon. I think he's been running this for months, maybe longer. But if you use this evidence, you need to go loud, public, because if you go quiet, they'll bury you. I held the thumb drive like it was made of glass. Alfred started his car. Change your passwords. Don't go home tonight. And Maya, be careful. These people have money and lawyers. You just have the truth. He drove away, leaving me alone in the concrete shadows, holding the key to everything. I spent the next 2 days mapping the fake vendors on a giant sheet of paper spread across my motel room floor. Every company connected to another like a spider web, all feeding into one central construction management firm in a neighboring state. From there, the money flowed to a charity with a glossy website and vague mission statements about community development. I dug into public records and found the charity's registered address, a lake house. The property deed had Gordon's name buried in a trust document, hidden behind 3 layers of legal entities. He hadn't just stolen money. He'd built an empire of theft and disguised it as philanthropy. Press photos showed him shaking hands with local politicians at charity galas. Articles praised his generous contributions to underserved communities. But the math didn't add up. The charity claimed to run programs that didn't exist, host events that never happened. It was all smoke and mirrors. Then I found another name on a director filing, the board chairperson's daughter, listed as a paid consultant. My teeth ached from clenching my jaw. This wasn't just Gordon, it was bigger. People at the top were involved, and they decided I would be their scapegoat because I was convenient and powerless. 2 days later, an email arrived from a fancy law firm with marble columns in their website photos. They wanted to resolve matters amicably. Translation: they'd give me a small settlement if I signed papers saying the whole thing was just a procedural misunderstanding. The number they offered would cover 3 months of rent. Maybe. My savings were gone, frozen in accounts I couldn't touch. I was eating ramen and sleeping in a pay-by-week motel. The pressure to just sign and take the money was crushing. I stared at that number until my vision blurred. If I signed, I'd be admitting to something I didn't do. I'd be letting Gordon and his friends win. I'd be sealing my own coffin. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark for a long time. Then I opened a burner email account, the kind you make with fake names and temporary passwords, and typed a message to Lance Reed, an investigative reporter I'd been following for years. He specialized in corporate fraud and never backed down from powerful people. I attached one of my vendor maps and wrote, "They're blaming the wrong person." Then I hit send before I could change my mind. My phone buzzed almost immediately. "Lance, call me from a safe number." My hands shook as I dialed. Lance answered on the first ring, voice sharp and focused. We talked fast. Names, dates, the 203 pattern, the bonus cycles that always followed big transfers. I told him about the charity, the lake house, the board connections. Lance listened without interrupting, and I could hear him typing notes in the background. When I finished, he let out a low whistle. If you're right, this is huge. Once we light this fuse, it's going to burn fast. No stopping it. My hands had stopped shaking. It wasn't relief I felt. It was readiness. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't running or hiding. I was fighting back. Lance asked the question I'd been dreading. Do you have proof the board knew about this? I hesitated. Not yet, but I'm working on it. He warned me that without board involvement, Gordon could claim he acted alone and the company would throw him under the bus while protecting everyone else. I needed more. I needed something that connected the dots all the way to the top. Lance promised to start digging on his end. Public filings, tax records, interview requests. He told me to stay safe and keep my evidence backed up in multiple locations. When we hung up, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. Small and fragile, but real. I crashed the company's public shareholder meeting the following week, sitting in the back row, wearing a baseball cap pulled low and sunglasses that made me look ridiculous. Gordon stood at the front, polished and confident, talking about operational excellence and strong quarterly results. He smiled like everything was fine, like he hadn't just destroyed my life. A retired employee stood up during the question period and asked what happened to the previous controller who'd left unexpectedly last year. Gordon's smile didn't waver. He gave some smooth answer about pursuing new opportunities and supporting career growth. But I remembered that goodbye email, just one sentence and a smiley face emoji. It had felt wrong even then. After the meeting ended, I pulled out my phone and found the former controller on a professional networking site. I sent a direct message. Did you leave because of midnight approvals and vendor problems? I didn't expect a response. These things usually went nowhere. But 3 hours later, my phone buzzed. She'd answered. My heart pounded as I opened the message, knowing whatever she said next would either confirm everything or send me back to square one. The response came at 3 a.m. I can't talk. Ironclad NDA. They threatened to take back my severance if I ever spoke about what I saw. My heart sank. Another dead end. But then a second message appeared. 3 invoice numbers and a short note. Look at fiscal week 36. I jumped out of bed and pulled up my backup files, hands shaking with exhaustion and adrenaline. I found the invoices she'd mentioned and started tracing them. Every single one connected back to the charity's supposed media campaign. Advertisements that never actually ran. Ghost ads paid for with real money. Hundreds of thousands of dollars flowing out for services that didn't exist. I was taking screenshots when my apartment buzzer screamed into the silence. 3:22 a.m. Nobody visits at 3:22. Nobody I wanted to see anyway. I froze, barely breathing, staring at my door like it might explode. The buzzer sounded again, angry and insistent. I crept to the peephole and peeked through. A man in a security contractor jacket was sliding something under my door, then walking away quickly. I counted to 200, heart hammering, before I cracked the door open. A legal document lay on my doormat, cease and desist, accusing me of defamation and harassment. They were trying to scare me into silence. But fear had burned away weeks ago, replaced by something harder, something they couldn't intimidate. The next morning, my burner email had a new message. Check the old Slack archives. No name, no signature. Just that one line. I knew immediately it was Alfred. He'd been quietly pulling records, building a case from the inside while I worked from the outside. I opened the encrypted file he'd attached and dove into months of archived workplace chat logs. Most of it was boring. Meeting reminders, lunch plans, random emoji reactions. But buried deep in a channel called Procurement Fast Track, I found something that made my blood run cold. Gordon's assistant had messaged a junior buyer, asking him to fast-track media payments to the charity. The message said to CC Board Relations. The junior buyer had asked for approval from marketing. The response came minutes later, a PDF approval form, pasted directly into the chat by the board chairperson's daughter. I downloaded the PDF and checked the metadata. It had been edited 30 seconds before being uploaded. Someone had created a fake approval in real time, covering their tracks while making it look official. This wasn't just Gordon stealing money. This was a coordinated effort involving multiple people at the highest levels of the company. Lance texted me, "We need a second on-the-record source from inside the company. Do you have anyone?" I thought of Clara from Accounts Payable. She'd always seemed honest, maybe even suspicious of things. Time to find out. I met Clara in a coffee shop on the other side of town, the kind of place where nobody from work would ever go. She looked like she hadn't slept in a month. Dark circles under her eyes, hands shaking around her cup. She glanced around nervously before pulling a folded spreadsheet from inside her jacket. "I thought I was losing my mind," she whispered. The spreadsheet was her own tracking of suspicious payments. The totals matched my map almost perfectly, off by less than $500. Clara told me she'd seen Gordon in the office at 2 a.m. once, right around the time one of the biggest transfers cleared. She'd asked him what he was doing there so late, and he'd smiled and said he was protecting the team. Clara's voice broke when she told me the internal auditor had resigned yesterday. No notice, no explanation. Just gone. That scared her more than anything because the auditor had been asking questions about the same vendors Clara had flagged. Now he was gone, and she was terrified she'd be next. I promised her I'd keep her name protected until the right moment, but I needed her records as backup evidence. She agreed, hands still shaking, and made me swear I'd be careful. When she left, I sat alone with 2 spreadsheets that told the exact same story from different angles. The walls were closing in on Gordon, and he probably didn't even know it yet. I tracked down the former internal auditor through his personal email. He picked up my call on the second ring, like he'd been waiting for someone to reach out. We talked carefully, dancing around details, but he gave me 5 specific dates and asked one critical question. "Who else had access to your security credentials?" I told him about the clone token, the extra authentication device registered to my account. He whistled softly. "You're not the first person they've done this to. You're just the first one they pushed into the spotlight." My stomach flipped. There were others, people who'd been blamed, discredited, maybe even destroyed, and nobody ever knew. He sent me a screenshot that made everything click into place. An MFA device enrollment completed from the board chairperson's office IP address. The registration happened on my account, but the computer it came from was in the executive suite. They hadn't even tried to hide their tracks because they never expected anyone to look. They'd gotten sloppy with power. The auditor's voice was grim. "They're cleaning house. Anyone who knows too much is being pushed out or silenced. Watch your back." He hung up before I could thank him. I sat staring at that screenshot, knowing I finally had the evidence I needed. Not just that Gordon was guilty, but that people at the very top had helped him do it. Lance published his first article 2 days later. He didn't use names yet, just numbers, patterns, and a graphic showing the 2:03 timing of dozens of suspicious transactions. The headline read, "Is corporate theft hiding behind charity?" It was careful, legally safe, but explosive enough to get picked up by larger outlets. Within hours, investor forums were buzzing. Stock analysts started asking questions. The company responded with a brittle statement about enhanced cyber hygiene protocols and one bad actor already identified. That last part stung. They meant me, but their defensive tone made them look guilty. Gordon went on television for damage control. He wore his best suit and said all the right words, but his face betrayed him. He looked nervous, sweaty, rehearsed. People noticed. Stock prices dipped. Shareholders demanded a board meeting. The pressure was building. That night, Alfred sent me something that made my heart stop. A calendar invitation he'd intercepted from the executive server. Subject: Lake House Meeting, Strategy Session. 3 attendees listed: Gordon Rex, board chairperson, legal counsel. They were gathering, planning their next move. Maybe destroying evidence. I called Lance immediately. "I think they're meeting at the Lake House tomorrow. If we want to catch them doing something stupid, this is our chance." Lance didn't hesitate. "I'll bring a photographer. You bring your evidence." I drove out to the lake before sunrise and parked across the water where trees gave me cover. I had binoculars, a camera with a zoom lens, and a notebook. The air was cold enough to see my breath. A delivery truck arrived at the house just after 8. 2 men unloaded boxes labeled Document Archival Services. My pulse jumped. They were moving evidence. I took photos of everything: license plates, timestamps, faces. At 10 o'clock, Gordon stepped onto the deck holding a drink, laughing with someone inside. He looked relaxed, celebratory, like he'd already won. I zoomed in and captured his face, that confident smile. Rage burned in my chest, but I kept my hands steady. Lance called. "Federal investigators just made contact through my editor. They want all your source material tonight." My breath caught. That meant FBI or SEC? Maybe both. The case was big enough to pull in serious attention. I told Lance about the document boxes, and he cursed under his breath. "They're destroying evidence. We need to move fast." I agreed to meet him in 2 hours with everything I had: the backup drive, Alfred's security exports, Clara's spreadsheets, the auditor's screenshots. Everything that proved this wasn't just me stealing money. This was organized corporate fraud at the highest level, and I had the receipts to prove it. I uploaded my files to Lance's secure server and then copied everything to 3 separate cloud accounts under fake names. I wasn't taking chances. 30 minutes after I finished, my apartment Wi-Fi died. Then my phone went dark. When it finally came back online, my personal email account was completely wiped. Every message, every contact, years of correspondence just gone. Someone had accessed my accounts remotely and erased everything they could reach. My hands shook with anger and fear. They were coming after me digitally now, trying to isolate me and delete evidence. I ran down to the building lobby and used the public computer to check my burner email. A new message was waiting. "Stop digging, Maya. Last warning." They'd used my real name, not my username, not my email address, my actual name. That meant they knew exactly who I was and where I was. The anonymous threat suddenly felt very personal and very dangerous. I grabbed my backup drive, stuffed clothes into a bag, and left my apartment without looking back. I couldn't stay there anymore. They knew where I lived, and I had no idea how far they'd go to protect their scheme. I drove to a motel on the other side of town, paid cash for 3 nights, and slept with my car keys under my pillow just in case I needed to run. The next morning, I went to the police station to file a report about the threats and the hacking. A man in street clothes intercepted me in the hallway before I could reach the front desk. He flashed a badge too quickly for me to read and said he'd been assigned to my case for safety purposes. His voice sounded wrong, too smooth, too practiced. He kept steering the conversation away from Gordon and the company, focusing instead on internet trolls and unhinged people online. My skin prickled with warning. Something felt off. When he turned to grab a form, I caught a glimpse of his wallet. The corner of an ID badge was visible, showing a logo I recognized. The same private security company that had delivered the 3 a.m. cease and desist letter. He wasn't a real cop. He was private security pretending to be law enforcement. I excused myself to the bathroom and called the auditor from a stall. "They've hired private security people," I whispered. "One just tried to interview me at the police station." The auditor's response was immediate and sharp. "Get out of there. Change locations. Don't tell anyone where you're going. They're escalating." I slipped out a side door and drove in random circles for an hour, checking my mirrors constantly, before finally stopping at a different motel on the far edge of town. I paid cash again and registered under a fake name. They were hunting me, and I was running out of places to hide. I moved into a month-to-month sublet near the train station, a tiny room that smelled like old coffee but had good locks on the door. I slept on an air mattress with my laptop next to me and my backup drive hidden inside a potted plant because paranoia was the only thing keeping me alive now. At 1:57 in the morning, I woke up suddenly, heart racing with no idea why. I checked my laptop and saw an admin login attempt on my old company email, someone testing whether it still forwarded to my personal account. It didn't, because I'd been smart enough to disconnect everything after the wipe. But they were still trying, still probing for weaknesses. Alfred messaged me from a brand new number I didn't recognize. "Budget committee meeting tomorrow 9 a.m. Record everything you can." I didn't know how he still had access to the executive calendar, but I trusted him. If he said this meeting was important, It was. I set 3 alarms and went back to a restless sleep, dreaming of locked doors and footsteps in hallways. Morning came too fast. I dressed in clothes that made me invisible, gray hoodie, jeans, baseball cap, and drove to the company headquarters. I bought a coffee from the lobby cafe and sat at a table near the glass-walled conference room where I could see and hear everything without being noticed. My phone was recording in my pocket. Whatever happened next, I'd have proof. The budget committee filed into the conference room at 9 sharp. Gordon stood at the head of the table, confident and composed. He launched into a presentation about sophisticated external cyber attacks and unfortunate security breaches by a former employee. He meant me. He was spinning the whole story, making himself the victim and me the villain. Committee members nodded along, buying every word. My stomach burned with rage. Then Clara stood up at the back of the room. Her voice shook but carried. "That's not true. It wasn't external. It was you, Gordon." The room went silent. She walked forward and placed a printed document on the table. The MFA enrollment log from the board chairperson's office. "This device was registered to Maya's account from your floor, from your people." A woman from legal reached for the document with a frozen smile, trying to control the situation. But it was too late. Murmurs rippled through the committee. People started asking questions. Gordon's face went red, then pale. He tried to speak, but stumbled over his words. Then I heard sirens. Real sirens, not in my head. Getting louder, coming closer. The entire room turned toward the windows as 3 black SUVs pulled up outside. People in windbreakers with FBI printed on the back climbed out and walked toward the entrance with the kind of calm authority that made your knees weak. The budget committee froze. Gordon looked around desperately, searching for an escape route that didn't exist. It was happening. Finally, federal agents moved through the building like a careful flood, polite, professional, and absolutely unstoppable. They separated everyone into different rooms, confiscated laptops and phones, bagged documents in evidence bags with labels and timestamps. Gordon tried to leave, saying something about a prior appointment, but an agent gently guided him back to his chair and asked him to wait. No handcuffs yet, but the message was clear. He wasn't going anywhere. Through the glass wall, Gordon's eyes finally found me sitting in the cafe. We locked eyes across the distance. He looked small in that moment. Not evil or powerful, just ordinary and trapped. His face showed everything: shock, anger, fear, and the dawning realization that he'd lost. An agent nodded at me on his way out, made brief eye contact, and said, "We'll be in touch about witness statements. Don't leave town." I nodded back, unable to speak. My hands were shaking so hard I had to put down my coffee. People were staring at me now. Coworkers who'd watched me get fired, who'd believed the lies about me. Some looked confused. Others looked horrified as they realized what had really happened. I stood up, legs unsteady, and walked out of that building for what I hoped was the last time. The morning sun felt impossibly bright. I sat in my car and cried, huge, gasping sobs that hurt my ribs. Relief and exhaustion and vindication all mixed together into something overwhelming. That night, a message arrived in my burner email. "We can still fix this. Come to the lake house tonight. Let's talk like adults." It came with an attachment, a photo of my mother's front door, taken from the street. My lungs stopped working. They were threatening my family now. Rage replaced fear instantly. I grabbed my phone, made sure it was fully charged, and drove toward the lake house with my recording app already running. I parked down the road where my car wouldn't be visible and crept close enough to hear voices through an open window. Gordon and the board chairperson were arguing. He was begging her to help him pin everything on rogue staff members. She cut him off coldly. "We did this for optics. The charity name mattered. Donor relationships mattered. You were supposed to be careful." I held my phone up, recording every word. They were confessing. Admitting that the charity was fake, that the theft was planned, that they'd built this scheme together and only cared about appearances. My heart hammered so loud I was sure they'd hear it. Then blue lights appeared across the water. Police and federal vehicles coming down the private road. I'd sent Lance a live stream link an hour ago, scheduled to go public if I didn't cancel it. He must have forwarded it to the FBI. The agents had been listening too. Gordon and the board chair scrambled for the door, But it was too late. Agents were already surrounding the house, calling for them to come out with their hands visible. The recording went public on Lance's website within an hour, then spread everywhere. News sites, social media, financial forums. People listened to Gordon and the board chair admitting everything in their own voices. The charity's website started deleting pages in real time, entire sections going dark like lights winking out on a sinking ship. By midnight, Gordon was arrested on wire fraud and conspiracy charges. The board chairperson resigned with a vague statement about health issues and stepping back for personal reasons. The company's stock crashed. Lawsuits started piling up, and my name started trending again, but this time next to words like exonerated and whistleblower. I sat on my air mattress in the sublet and cried with my whole body. The kind of crying you do when the bruise finally stops being touched, when the weight finally lifts. I'd been carrying so much fear and anger for so long that I'd forgotten what it felt like to breathe without it. My phone exploded with messages. News requests, interview offers, legal firms wanting to represent me in a lawsuit against the company. Lance called to check on me, his voice proud and relieved. Alfred sent a simple text, "You did it." Clara messaged, saying she'd been interviewed by the FBI and felt like she could finally sleep. I replied to a few people, ignored most, and eventually turned off my phone. I needed silence. I needed to remember who I was before all of this. Months later, I stood in a bright co-working space in front of 20 people sitting in folding chairs. Behind me, a projector displayed my company logo, a simple scale icon with the words Balance Point Consulting underneath. My tagline read, "Because no one should pay for someone else's lies." The morning light came through tall windows, and I felt nervous but ready. These people had come because they'd heard my story. They were accountants, assistants, managers, engineers, all carrying evidence of fraud or misconduct at their companies. All terrified of speaking up because they'd seen what happened to whistleblowers. They'd seen what happened to me. I told them everything. How to document properly, how to protect evidence, how to find allies, how to move slowly when companies try to rush you into settlements, how to speak loud when they want you silent, how to never sign your name to someone else's story. When I finished, the room was quiet, not the scared quiet I'd lived with for months. This was different. This was the sound of people realizing they weren't alone, that they had options, that someone had survived this and come out the other side. A woman in the front row raised her hand and asked, "How did you keep going when everything felt hopeless?" I smiled. I didn't keep going. I just refused to stop. There's a difference.